morning, everybody. My name is Mia Johnson, and I am the chapter president for the National Coalition of 100 Black Women in Dallas metropolitan area.
Good morning, everyone, or in Spanish, hola. I am Tracy Grooms, and I am the president of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, San Antonio Chapter, Incorporated.
And we are the presidents of the Texas chapters. We're the only Texas chapters. And so we're partnering today to bring you some information on teen dating violence. It is a very sensitive, yet very important information, or a very important topic that we're going to bring you today. It's not something that's talked about very often, but we wanted to talk to you about it today. So we wanted to come together as chapter presidents to bring you this very informational webinar. And so we hope this is something that you'll take, that you'll dine on, that you'll talk about with your families. And we really hope that this is something that will be very helpful for your families.
Well, we have a panel that we have put together, and the most important thing about this panel is that they come from all walks of life, and they have multiple experiences, both in their professions and personally. So to tell you a little bit about our speakers, we have our host, which will be Dr. Stacia Alexander. Dr. Alexander is the director of the mental health clinic at Paul Quinn College. And the main thing about Paul Quinn College is they have put the orientation with the mental health clinic for students to adjust as part of their onboarding process. Another one of our speakers is Patricia Castillo from the P.E.A.C.E initiative. She has been in the business for 40 years, and she reaches out personally and advocates in this area. We also have two judges. We have Judge Rosa Gonzalez Speedlin, and we have Judge Yolanda Huff. So between the four of these people, we think you're going to get some valuable information. Also, at the end of this presentation, you will see links, but most importantly, you can also go to our websites and get additional links, because we will be providing this material to you. Thank you.
And again, we really hope that this is something that you'll be able to take and really apply. If there is something that is going on, that there's some sensitive information, we're going to be providing that information, as Tracy mentioned, at the end of this particular webinar. We'll be chatting with you in the chats. We'll be answering some of your questions. Again, we understand that this is a very, very sensitive topic, and so we'll be available to answer any questions that you may have. And if you have some questions for either of us, we'll be available. Our information, our contact information will be provided for you as well. And again, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we wish you nothing but the best. Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us this morning for a very important discussion on teen dating violence. I'm Dr. Stacia Alexander, your moderator for today, and I have three very esteemed ladies who have worked diligently in the profession for years. Their combined experience will amaze you. So to have them on our panel discussion this morning is absolutely rewarding to me in terms of the work that I do in the mental health field. So ladies, if you will today, just introduce yourself and tell us how you fit into this fight against domestic violence, and offer one little known fact about teen dating violence that maybe the general public just really does not know. Judge Rosa, will you go first for us?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, I think. My name is Judge Rosa Speedlin-Gonzalez. I preside over Bexar County Court at Law number 13. It is one of two county courts at law in Bexar County that hear exclusively domestic violence cases. Our court is also going to be the premier court for a court of first impression, and it's the Reflejo Court, and it's going to be a specialty court for violent offenders who have a history of some level of substance abuse. I've been working in the field, including child abuse and domestic violence and other social services for the past 11 in doing the work as a non-attorney prior to law school, 17 as an attorney, that's 27, and now I'm in my second year as a judge. So 29, almost 30 years, not quite as long as Patricia, but you know, she's a mentor of mine, and I follow her, and I'm doing what I can to support her efforts. What I do know about teens that are engaged in domestic violence are teens that have been traumatized. They've been exposed to domestic violence as children, whether in the home or outside the home at some level. They've experienced that trauma, and they are duplicating what's been modeled to them.
Okay.
That's what we know. That's a fact.
That's, yeah. I know we all know that in this room, but just for the general public, I appreciate you letting them know. For families, if they're seeing it in the home, they're more likely to duplicate that in their own relationships. Thank you for that. Patricia, since she mentioned you, will you share with us your introduction and one little known fact for teen dating violence?
Okay, thank you for including me in today's session. I'm a social worker by profession. I have been doing social work for almost 41 years. And with the P.E.A.C.E initiative, I've been there since 1990. I'm one of the co-founders of the P.E.A.C.E initiative. And P stands for putting an end to abuse through community efforts. And a little known fact about teen dating violence is its connection to human trafficking, and that following through to then sexual slavery. And a lot of people are not making those connections, but we're finding that there is definitely a connection that all parents, everybody should be aware of, because our teenagers are so vulnerable when this kind of stuff is playing out.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do think we need to spend some time talking about that during this panel discussion to help people draw that correlation. Mm-hmm. Judge Yolanda Huff, thank you for joining us. Can you introduce yourself and tell us one known fact that you've seen through your court?
I'm Judge Yolanda Huff. I preside over County Court 12 in San Antonio, Texas. It's a criminal misdemeanor bench, and within that court, I have the mental health court. And that is how I mainly come in contact with the young women or men that have been involved in a domestic violence or a simple assault, and they have a mental health issue, which is really a big problem also, how mental health deals with someone that is also involved with domestic violence, and how that just makes the whole problem so much worse. If you have a mental health, you've been diagnosed with a mental health issue, and you are also involved in a domestic violence issue. And I want to spin a little bit off what Judge Gonzalez said about the domestic violence and how kids are traumatized, especially the teenagers, because we both did CPS. I know I did CPS cases for over 20 years. And I don't think a lot of people know that people that are getting CPS cases, and if it involves any child from a baby all the way up to 18 years old, CPS can come in and take children out of homes just because of domestic violence. Wow. And that in itself is traumatizing the young and the teenagers. And not only that, some teenagers that are also themselves that have CPS cases because of domestic violence. And that's mostly what I'm encountering with teenagers and domestic violence in the home or the court system.
Thank you for sharing that. I've also been working with Child Protective Services for over 20 years. Like, that's been my adult life. From a mental health perspective, that's one of those private clinicians that you all refer to. Yeah. So yes. I'm on that side of the coin. And a lot of people really don't know that if you have domestic violence in the home, that you are at risk for losing your right to parent. And they don't tie those two together. So thank you for bringing that up. Ladies, can we start with the occurrence of teen domestic violence? Like, has it increased over the years, or has there been a decrease? What are you all seeing? Patricia, will you start for us?
I think there's probably been an increase, but I also would attribute some of that to reporting. People being more apt to report and to seek help. And oftentimes it's the adults who seek help on behalf of, their teenage kid or their grandchild. They're concerned about them. They're concerned about their safety. Okay. And so it's happening, and I would say that it's growing, but, again, it might also be attributable to more reporting, more people coming forward, more revelation.
That makes sense. And Judge Rosa, with you having worked in different sectors of the field, have you seen an increase in the level of violence per se, like the type of violence that teens are experiencing?
No, but I'm going to go and play off what Patricia says, and I say it having had the experience of campaigns being launched by CPS to encourage folks to report, and having worked at CPS and as an investigator, anytime there was, I started doing that in the 80s. So back then there was no social media. There were billboards, right?
Right.
So you saw all these billboards across our county and across the state. If you saw child abuse, reported 1-800. Anytime a whole new line, a whole new campaign, billboard campaign was launched, you saw the numbers increase.
Okay.
Anytime kids went back to school, you saw these reporting numbers increase.
Okay.
And so with teen violence, as with other violence, the fact that we have improved our informational technology, the fact that we have improved access to reporting technology. You know, when I was at CPS in the 80s, the first mobile phone was a banana phone. And, you know, 5 of us in an investigation unit had to share that banana phone when we were on call for priority 1 calls.
Right.
Today, everybody has a cell phone. And we've seen this play out in the last 2 weeks in our society. It's not maybe that the teen violence has increased. It's always been there.
Okay.
But now we have technology to record it to report it.
Okay.
Now we have the technology to call 911 as it's happening.
Okay.
And so those types of 911 calls, either from neighbors or the victims themselves, sometimes even the perpetrators, are making it into the courtrooms as evidence.
Okay.
And we didn't have that before. And so from my vantage point, I think that the issue has been there and it's been steadily growing with the population growth. But we also have circumstances that are put upon us beyond our control, acts of God, COVID-19, that force people to live in close quarters, force people to be relegated to a certain location that bars them from leaving the home,
Right.
leaving that situation, and it's prime opportunity for the perpetrator to become abusive.
Okay.
So I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of all these different demographics and dynamics that have led to an increase, whether it be education, whether it be the number by volume, sheer volume alone. But the numbers are increasing.
Okay. Patricia, what age group are the teenagers at risk for domestic violence?
Oh my God, Stacia, we're seeing kids as young as 11 and 12 years old.
Really?
And, oh yes. I mean, and I've been an educator on these issues for a very long time, right? And there was a time when I went to go do classes for 3rd graders, and this may be shocking to you, but this was in the 80s. 3rd grade girls talking to me about their boyfriends, about French kissing, about getting hickeys, and about being the girlfriend of an older guy, an older boy. Yeah. And so you had these little girls that were already being exposed to all of this kind of, interaction with boys that were older than them. And it's very scary, and it's really, growing up in an age where our children are being raised by television and computers and cell phones.
It is. It is amazing. And I think when you really sit down and look at everything, it's really the exposure. It's the exposure to things that they're simply not ready for.
I do want to talk about language and vernacular.
Okay.
Patricia and I, a few years ago, had a conversation, and the conversation led to child abuse is domestic violence.
Okay.
And the victims in those cases are just happen to be children, so we use different language.
Right. Terminology.
And so one of the billboards that Patricia developed in that campaign is, a child's quote, "Daddy, when you hit mommy, that's child abuse because you are emotionally traumatizing that child."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a seed that's planted within that child. It's like a stamp, it's a brand, right? And once it's on that child, you have to work very hard to lift that stigma from them.
Okay.
Regardless of whether they were the one throwing the punch or they were just watching it happen.
Observers, right. Judge Huff, can you explain to us why there has been such an increase in violence from the from teen domestic violence, what you're seeing in the mental health court?
Yeah, as I was saying before, I think that I'm going to pick up off a little bit of what Judge Gonzalez was saying about just the overall access to more access to social media, and I think that we're getting better at meaning the judicial system or all these social organizations and nonprofits that are out there, that we're getting better at maybe finding it, defining it, bringing people in, advertise, or just because through social media it's so easy to connect. When I started practicing law about 20 years ago, there was no such thing as domestic violence courts, and now in Bexar County we have 2 domestic violence courts, and there were the first specialty court started about in 1989. Now we're getting our first domestic violence specialty court. So I think that we as a society are getting better at identifying it and treating it. And maybe it was just the numbers were high there all along, but I think as a society we're getting better at defining it, seeking it out, and treating it.
Okay, all right. So not necessarily that the type of teen domestic violence has gotten worse, but we've gotten better at detecting it.
Yes, that's what I think.
Yes.
Awareness. Okay, great.
Yes, awareness, exactly.
Okay. What are some things that parents need to look for in terms of teen domestic violence if they're not familiar with the signs? Patricia, can you explain that to us? What do they need to look for?
Yes, it would be important for parents to recognize any kind of a change in the demeanor of their child. Are they becoming more isolated? Are they becoming more like school is no longer as important as it used to be before? Are they becoming more just attached to that relationship? Are they starting to maybe drop if they're involved like in extracurricular activities, and so they get out of pep squad or they get out of cheerleading or they get out of sports, because oftentimes the abusers are very possessive and jealous, and so they don't want them to be involved in those kinds of things because it's something that interferes in their control of the victim, right? They might start using drugs or alcohol because that's also one way of coping with what's happening to them. Grades may drop. You might start seeing injuries that the explanation for the injuries doesn't really jive with where that injury could have come from. And then we're beginning to see a lot of what is referred to as coercive control. Some states have even gotten into making laws about coercive control, where they start, just really controlling what you wear, what you watch on social media, whether or not you work, how you spend your money, whether or not you have hobbies.
Like mind games. Like mind games. That's what you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, mind games, but also controlling their behavior. Like what are they doing, right?
And that
you go ahead, jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I've touched on this. Patricia has heard me talk about this. As parents, as caretakers, we need to watch what gifts your children are getting. how the person that has received that gift, what they do with that gift. And I'll give you an example. A young lady completely freaking out because she can't find this necklace that was given to her by her boyfriend. Or she comes back home after having left to go to school because she forgot to put on that promise ring. Okay, or, because there's consequences to them not wearing that necklace or not having that ring on. Because when they get to see that new boyfriend or new girlfriend, if they don't have that on as a symbol that they're taken, then there's going to be a price to pay. Whether it's emotional abuse, verbal abuse, bullying, insulting, and that's also a different type of seed. So we as parents, we as caretakers need to be able to say to our children, hey, we don't accept gifts, or you can't put that type of value on that gift, and that gift should not be dictating your behavior or how that other person expects you to wear or use that gift. So
Okay.
there's all of these things that we need to teach, because children aren't born with that type of book that they're going to know what to do with this gift, or know to say I can't take that gift, or is it a gift that I can wear whenever I want, or are you going to be dictating what to do to me what to do with that gift? Because when you start dictating, Patricia will tell you, that's the first thing that you see in people that are trying to control you. And so the domestic violence starts with a control issue.
Right. Judge Huff, thank you. And I want to ask you this from this perspective in terms of what you're seeing with what parents should look for. What about from the perpetrator? What should parents look for to understand that their child may be the perpetrator of domestic violence, especially with what you're seeing in your court?
Well, because a lot of times when I get an assault case and in the mental health court, it is, if it's an assault, it is overwhelmingly, and this is a mental issue, it's a young person. I would say between the ages of 17, maybe 20, 21. And the parents do not want that person to go to jail. They want help for that person. That person is beat up the stepfather, beat up a little sibling, beat up a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Everybody in that situation wants help for that person, because that is a mental health issue attached to that. I want to say one little thing with the question you asked before. I found that in doing CPS cases and also with the mental health court, that sometimes we're saying, what do the parents need to look out for? We find ourselves really having to educate the parents.
Right.
I'll give you two quick examples. When I was doing CPS cases, I was assigned to represent a young mother. She was only 19, but she already had 5 children at the age of 19. I sat her down in my office. Her mother was sitting down right beside her. And I said to her, what are you doing for birth control? And she says, nothing. The mother didn't say anything. I told her she needs to get on some kind of form of birth control. Then I asked her, what does she want to do with her life? I said, you have value in your life besides having children. It's like, when I asked her that question, do you want to be a ditch digger, a lawyer, a doctor, in movies? What do you want to do? She had no idea. It's like someone had never even ever asked her that question. And the mom was sitting there right beside her. It's like, if the mom doesn't know this to teach the child, like, obviously she's 19 years old, she already has 5 children, someone is abusing, something is going on there, the mom is not teaching to have that issue either. No one ever told her. And I also had a young mother, 18 years old, in my mental health court, that she was actually in a very abusive relationship with her boyfriend, and the mom was going to okay that this past February on Valentine's Day for the boyfriend and her to get married. I really had to have my caseworker talk to her in a very real way of how destructive this would be for her, a young mom at the age of 18 marrying her abuser. But that's she saw no other way out. She had dropped out of school. And in both of those situations with dealing with an 18-year-old and an 18-year-old, their moms were involved in the picture, but it was like we, as the judicial system and with my caseworkers, were parenting them more than the mother was. Like, to me, that's what they were saying and not saying is that, well, no one's ever told me these things, so I don't know how to tell my daughter these things, because no one's ever had this serious sit down talk with me. And that's what I thought CPS cases.
Right. And that's what I found is a lot of times it's the education. Like some people victims do not realize that they're being abused. They don't understand
Yeah.
that it's not okay for this person to treat you that way.
That's
So,
And Dr. Alexander, let me just, and I'm not knocking religion, and I'm a believer, and and Patricia and I have had this conversation as well, and we're actually involved. I am with Carrie Wilcoxon here in San Antonio on putting together a religious leaders collaboration or some sort of working together, so that the messages that these families are hearing from their spiritual leaders, from their religious leaders, is not, you hear it often, you spare the rod, you spoil the child. And all the science is showing that we should spare the rod and find other ways to educate this child. But many families rely on biblical scripture, rely on leadership from their church leaders to define for them what their family should look like, what roles they should take within that family, what men should do as opposed to what women should do. And a lot of times, I'm not saying all the time, but when it comes to domestic violence in children, that's the roadmap they're following. And without any further exposure to science, database types of theories, and that's all they have. And so the wrath of God, the God of their understanding, is often used to dictate their behavior. We are in San Antonio specifically. We are in a very Hispanic community, and there's very strong definitions about gender roles. And on any given day, Patricia and I and Judge Huff will get an older man come in and say, "I got to control my wife." Or if I'm the one that controls my family, and I've got to be the one with the heavy hand. And they mean it not only figuratively, but literally.
they do. And when we pull all of this into thinking about teen dating violence, this is where they're getting the messages from. They're getting the messages from their parents' relationships in terms of how they discipline the kids. They're getting it from the church. They're getting it from their peers. Like, the only way you'll know that he loves you is because he's treating you this way. So all of these variables are feeding into what we're seeing. We think it's a rise in teen domestic violence, but hearing from you professionals is not necessarily that there's a rise in it, but there's more exposure because of the campaigns that are being run to highlight, in discussions like these that we're having, to highlight that teen domestic violence is occurring. So in terms of prevention, what would you all say? Like, Judge Huff, you mentioned education. This 18-year-old, she just hadn't ever been educated. At what point should we start talking to our youth about healthy dating practices? Because Patricia, you said an 11-year-old. Like, what age should we start?
Oh, we definitely need to start elementary school. If it was up to me, we would be talking about this stuff K through 12.
Okay.
Because, with an age appropriate curriculum, of course.
Exactly, just like we do drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
It's an age appropriate curriculum.
Yes, that's right.
And Dr. Alexander, but we know in the academia world and in the social sciences world that children come into kindergarten already imprinted, right? They have had 5 years of their life with their families. And there's that old saying that everything I learned about how to get along in life, I learned by the time I got to kindergarten. And those are things that our families imprint us with. And so Patricia's saying elementary school, and I agree 100% with her, that we should be teaching our children how to get along and what it is not to get along, how to define inappropriate behavior from the minute they step into that kindergarten class.
Right.
I would like to say something, excuse me, Stacia, about what we were talking about before. When you were Dr. Huff brought up, Judge Huff brought up the whole issue of a 19-year-old with 5 children.
Yes.
Another thing that is very much an intersection with all of this is children that are raised in households where there's a lot of sexual abuse.
Mm,
As you well know, that's intergenerational.
right.
And when you are a victim of sexual abuse as a child, then you learn very early on that your value is in your body and in your sexuality.
Yeah.
And so if nobody counters that way of thinking, then you think the only way to be loved and to be shown affection and to be cared for is by, providing sex for somebody, gratifying somebody adult's sexual needs. And so, and then if nobody's talking to you about birth control, then you're not going to be able to protect your body or know about your reproductive options, right? And then the other thing too is that we live in a state where a parent can give permission for somebody as young as 13 years old to get married.
Okay.
That's still legal in Texas.
Yeah.
And so, you have all of these like things that, affect a culture that says that the men are supposed to take care of the women. And so if a male shows interest in a little girl, the parent is thinking, oh, good, there's somebody else ready and available to take care of her. And it's out of my hands.
Yeah, that's one of the issues. Yeah. And so when you're thinking about teen dating violence, because you mentioned earlier about the sex trafficking, do you think that, okay, so with teen dating violence, that leaves them more vulnerable for sex trafficking? What can we tell parents to do to protect their children from not only teen dating violence, but also from the trafficking, the human trafficking?
Well,
So go ahead, Patricia.
Well, the thing is that parents, first of all, need to have a good relationship between them two.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they have a relationship that's about conflict and battling each other and fighting with each other and being jealous about each other, then they're neglecting their children.
Okay.
And their children have needs of attention, of love, of respect, of guidance, of, instilling values, teaching about beliefs and traditions, and if we're not doing that for our children, they're going to go look for it somewhere else.
Right.
And the perpetrators are lurking in their cell phones,
Right.
on their apps.
Exactly. Was that what you were going to say, Judge Rosie?
That's what I was going to say, because I was on a panel almost 2 years ago, and it was a sex trafficking panel. And the parents were present up in arms, and they're like, what can we do? And I said, this right here is the portal that will open up the gates of hell if you don't monitor this with your children. And I did family law and child abuse for almost 17 years. And any therapist that I thought was worth the diploma hanging on their wall would say to a parent, you should really not get your child a cell phone until you need to start tracking their whereabouts at 16 when they start driving. Because prior to that age, you should know where they're at and who they're with. The moment you introduce that new technology to a child without the proper supervision and the proper apps to control their content, you are opening up a portal to them from an outside world of strangers who are perpetrators, who are repeaters. And that's not just the cell phone, it is video games. Nowadays, the child can get on and play a video game with somebody across the world, right?
Right.
Well, and you don't know who that person is. You think it may be another child, but it could be a 35-year-old man that is out there on the internet, trolling the internet for children to bring into their net.
Right.
And so technology has definitely aided our society, but it has also opened up all sorts of other portals that are very detrimental to our children.
One of the things that I caution parents on is we're not studying technology like teenagers do. They're far ahead of the game than we are. I had a child who had so many files on her phone. She had a file inside of a file inside of a file. Like, it took them a long time to figure out where the pictures were. There were pictures, and it took them a long time to find out where the pictures were because she had embedded it so deep into her phone. They have far more time than we do as parents to, to figure out that technology. So we do need to be careful. So we're having panel discussions like this, and we appreciate you all collaborating with the National Coalition of Black Women. How can other community members get involved in this quest to not only address but to reduce and eliminate teen dating violence? Judge Rosie, what are some of your suggestions? One or two, just so we can get some information.
Definitely monitor your children, supervise your children. And it may be hard in our current society because one of the reasons that we haven't talked about increase that could be a factor in the increase is that we come from a society in which there was a one-parent provider and one parent stayed home for the household and to raise the kids. Okay. That went to two parents working, and now we have both parents working 2 jobs each just to keep up with the Joneses, right, and put food on the table, which leaves a lot of time for these kids to be unsupervised. I was a product of a 2 parents working household, and my mom would go to school at night. But she always made sure that we were supervised by a human, a warm body, whether it be a coach, a teacher in after-school activities, a relative. We didn't have these phones. We didn't have even cable back then, right? We had the 3 channels. And it went off at midnight, and all we heard was a beep, right? Till it came back on at 6 o'clock in the morning. And now we have constant stimulus for these kids. And if we're not careful, they will veer off wherever their mind finds interest in. It's never, it's rarely appropriate if it's after a certain time in the day. Supervision, staying involved with your family, and getting educated. And if you find that your child is traumatized, making sure that you don't take an approach of they'll get over it eventually. They won't, because they need proper interventions. Right. They need a counselor. They need the roadmap to get back on the right road to become healthy, productive members of their families, to become healthy partners in relationships, and to become productive members of our communities. Okay.
Patricia, can you share with us, what do you think we need to do to engage the community in this quest to reduce teen domestic violence?
Well, definitely educate yourself. There's so much information on the internet. If you don't have a chance to go to a class, to spend time in one of my sessions, right? But educate yourself if you have children, because you've got to be knowledgeable. They don't come with instructions, and so as a parent, you got to be aware of what are the things that are threats, that are posing threats to the well-being and the welfare of your child. One of the things that we haven't mentioned too, that impacts the lives of young children, is that more and more they're being exposed to porn. Even 11, 12, 13 years old, and that's very warping for a small child's mind. So you definitely got to be monitoring their technology, watching what they're accessing. Go to a workshop, please, about the applications and what those applications can get for the kids. Also, limit their access to video games, because so many of the video games are violent. And that too is warping for their brains. And if you yourself as an adult are in an abusive relationship, you are molding your children's brains by exposing them to the kind of relationship you are in. And so, and especially for children 0 to 5, a lot of times people think, well, it's a baby, they don't know what's going on, they're asleep in the other room. And that's not true. That's when you're doing the most damage to your babies. And that's the setup. And then be communicative with your kids. Talk to them. Listen to them. Shut up every once in a while and listen, because you learn a lot about their lives and what they're going through when you just be quiet and spend time and just put yourself in front of them and listen.
Engage.
Engage. Minimum 15 minutes per day with each child.
Yeah.
You know,
You know what? They've been saying that for over 20 years. I used to do a group with families and children, and they said 15 minutes per child per day, and it means a lot. It goes a
it
long
works
way.
wonders.
It works wonders. Judge Huff, we were actually going over ways that the community can get involved. What are some suggestions that you have for parents or other people who want to get involved in this quest to reduce teen dating violence?
I actually thought, when I think back over like the last 20 years of me being a defense attorney, and now I've been on the bench for, well, going on now about a year and these 6 months, and I think that we have come so far, like with the startup of the like Judge Gonzalez's domestic violence court. It's a big new thing in San Antonio called domestic violence collaboration, things of that nature we didn't have to bring awareness to what this, pointing out, um, figuring out what's going on. How do we reach these teenagers? I think the more that people tune into it, the more that we make these awareness projects, that it's bringing light, it's shedding light on domestic violence. And I think we've all, probably everybody on this panel has been around long enough to remember when there was no such things as any specialty courts. Can you imagine now that we're going to have the very first domestic violence specialty court in Bexar County? We didn't have anything like this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or your specialty courts, or even domestic violence court itself, just a regular court that's exclusively for domestic violence. I really think that we may be a little slow, but society is slowly catching up. Human trafficking, domestic violence, teen domestic violence, parents are catching on. I think that we may be moving slow, but we're moving slowly in the right direction.
And so can you all give us, let's say, 3 resources, one from each of you, if a parent or community leader expects that there's teen domestic violence going on, what should they do? One from each of you. Patricia, will you start?
Definitely, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and the number is 1-800-799-7233.
Okay.
And have a conversation with one of those hotline members. They are a treasure of information, and they can guide you to all the resources in your community.
Okay.
Because that's what they're charged with knowing.
Thank you.
And it's objective, and it's you don't feel like you're exposing yourself, because oftentimes people want some privacy in the beginning, right? To try to get the help, and you can do that without shame, without embarrassment, and educate and inform yourself.
Okay. Judge Huff, what's one resource for parents?
Well, if you find yourself involved with the judicial system, and it could be a domestic violence case, you can tell your attorney that you want to check out these new specialty courts. Because the specialty courts, the domestic violence court that's opening up, that Judge Gonzalez, and the mental health court, if it's an assault that you've gotten arrested for, but you have a mental health component to that, your case can be slid over to these specialty courts, where your case is dealt with, and you are dealt with in a very intimate way. That these programs last anywhere from 12 months to 18 months, but now we do everything, like anything from finding you housing to giving you bus passes, we have close calls, we have food banks. It's so many things that the resources there that a lot of defense attorneys don't know. I try to make it my business to tell families out of the community about these. Hey, if you're ever arrested for this, let your attorney know these programs are here. There are resources for you.
Okay. Judge Rosa, one resource?
Themselves, the parents. And this is back to basics thing. And what I mean by that is, I don't know, my parents used to put the fear of God in me by saying, I'm going to call their parents and I'm going to talk to them about what's going on. And so what I mean by that is, if a parent suspects that something's going on with their child, their teen child, preteen child with another child, don't hesitate to find out who those parents are and make a call. Make a call and say, did you know that this happened between my child and your child? And until we get this figured out, I'm not letting my child have contact with your child until we can figure this out. And you may make a decision that your child not to have contact with that child again, with that teenager again. But that's giving yourself as a parent the power to do that.
Okay.
And making that call, like Patricia says, and looking for the resources that Judge Huff talked about. But those problems are very deep rooted in the home. And so no one wants their business out there. And one of the steps that you can try and take in a positive direction is to be accountable as a parent, and to try to make the other parent accountable, that neighbor, that parent, just a few blocks away and within your school district. But make the call and snuff that problem out through resources and through communication.
You know what? This is such a large topic. There's no way we'd be able to comprehensively cover it in a 1 hour panel discussion. I think that's the only unfortunate part about this panel discussion is that, I feel like we only hit the tip of the iceberg. Yes. Because it is such a broad problem.
Yes.
And like you all were giving your resources, I know for us, the first thing people come to us is because they want counseling to recover. Like you said, they're not just going to buck up and be over it, that they actually need some counseling services. And so all of these entities working together are what will create wellness with our teams. We're not going to be able to ignore it. The last thing I want to ask you, are there safe zones in the community? Like, where does one find the information about a safe zone if a teen is being abused by, in a romantic relationship or with a family member? Are there safe zones like at the firehouses or anything like that?
We have drop-in centers. I personally know because my wife does work with the Pride Center here in San Antonio, okay. And they're a safe zone. Okay. There's the Thrive Center at our local Haven for Hope shelter, which assists young adults and teenagers in finding resources when they've been kicked out of the house and find themselves homeless. So those are two that I know off the top of my head that are replicated areas. I know that other large urban metropolitan areas in Texas also have.
Okay. And can they get that resource list that they call the 1-800 number that you gave us, Patricia? Okay.
Yes. Yes, they can get that. I know also, like, for example, here in San Antonio, the San Antonio Independent School District launched a program that talked, that was about police, law enforcement notifying the counselors at the schools of the child where that previous night the officers had been at their house, there had been some family violence, some trouble, and the kids got traumatized. And so they make sure and let the counselors at the school know, listen, if so-and-so child from this and this address, is acting up today, it's because we were at their house last night.
That's called wraparound services.
Yes.
It's
so it is because, because the kids aren't going to sit there and spill their guts. They're not. They're just going to act out. And so, and this gives the school a heads up about what's going on in that child's personal life that is now going to affect their presence in the school setting.
It truly takes a village. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It does. Mm-hmm. It does. It takes all of us in the community to collaborate. Well, ladies, thank you. I hope this is helpful to someone, and I know we want to share it, with a broader audience just to help people understand the depth of things that are going on in our communities and how they can get help. Like there are things from the juvenile courts to the adult courts to community programming to help people so that they do not have to live in situations like this. So we appreciate you all for joining us. We are going to include a list of resources at the end of the video. So anyone watching, please make sure that you continue so that you can get that list of resources. And even if you don't need them for yourselves, keep them or snap a picture of it so that you can help someone else that you may come into contact with that is experiencing not only teen domestic violence in a relationship, but domestic violence in the home. So, ladies, we appreciate you joining us today. All of the technical we got through it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
Anytime, anytime.
Excellent. It was nice meeting you all.
Same here. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this impactful discussion on teen dating violence. Although the conversation was comprehensive, we only reached the tip of the iceberg. Like I said, there are so many variables that are involved in keeping our children safe. The National Coalition of 100 Black Women takes this initiative seriously, and we want to continue the dialogue. So how can you do this? What is your call to action? What can you do to bring awareness to teen dating violence in your community? What are some ways that you can get involved? How can you partner with us, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, and other organizations to help bring awareness and action? We need to develop safe zones in the schools and in the communities. How can you help? Reach out to us. Our contact information is here. We're looking forward to not only connecting with you on this initiative, but the other ones that we have put forth on a national level to impact change in our communities. Thank you. I appreciate having served as your moderator. This is Dr. Stacia Alexander.